And welcome into the PHNX Cardinals podcast, presented to you by the DraftKings Sportsbook app, America's top-rated sportsbook. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. I'm Johnny Venerable. He is Bo Brock, live at the PHNX headquarters in downtown Phoenix. And we have gone now how many days? This is our fourth straight week of discussion surrounding who will be the next head coach of our beloved Arizona Cardinals. And I believe now, Bo, on January 30th, we are not any closer to than when we were the day Michael Bidwill fired Cliff Kingsbury.
We actually feel like we've gotten further away from it, right? I mean, we just keep on adding interview requests and candidates. It's Oprah giving away cars on her show. You get an interview request. You get an interview request. AR in the chat, Rafa in the chat, Jason in the chat, Marcus in the chat. You all get interview requests to become the Arizona Cardinals head coach. That's where we are. Is it a smokescreen? Is it a leverage play? I don't know. We're going to break down these three new candidates. Mike Kafka. You got the two coordinators from the Bengals. We're going to see if any of those guys should be serious candidates, because I'm not too hot on Mike Kafka. I think Kafka, you're getting way too far from Andy Reid on that point in trying to shoehorn Brian Daboll's success in there. So, but the Bengals guys, let's talk about them as well. And then we'll, of course, get into the conversation about our beloved Sean Payton. What's the latest? Is it over? Is the dream over?
It's not over. And I see a lot of people on Twitter saying it's over. I'm sorry. Did he take another job? Did he bow out? Have the Cardinals hired anybody? Didn't we just do this last week before Howard Balzer, our beloved Howard Balzer, GoPHNX.com, broke the news that he was going to meet with the Cardinals? Everybody take a deep breath and relax for a second, okay? I don't believe Sean Payton has any options outside of the Cardinals, which makes the Cardinals viable for Sean Payton until it's not. And I love these comments here. Jason Sandoval, I would be a prime candidate. Marcus in the chat, my Panera Bread degree coming in clutch. Absolutely. We love our Panera Bread U graduates here on PHNX Cardinals. Okay, in all seriousness, here's what's going down. Because Bo and I, we recorded a banger of an audio-only pod last night, basically throwing water on, well, they're certainly not going to bring in first interview guys again this week, are they? And what did they do this morning before even 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time? They did 1, 2, 3 requests for externals to talk to this week, all for the first time. This is the second round of first interviews, if you will. And you could look at it one of two ways. And I'll let you tell me what you think it is, because this is how I'm playing this.
Okay.
This is either a leverage play, because as we talked about, Sean Payton still very much interested in getting back into coaching, as he said yesterday on the Fox pregame. This is a leverage play for Mickey Loomis and the Saints. We will not be pushed around. We're not going to give up the farm. We like Sean. We don't love him to the extent we're going to gut our franchise. Sit your ass down and wait 5 more days. That's one option, and I think it's very, very plausible. The other option is they're not interested in Sean. No one's interested in Sean. The league has moved on from the Saints and Sean. They were turned off. They weren't interested, and that a lot of people think that. And so now they are resetting their coaching search, Bo, with a bunch of brand new guys that they have never talked to before. When this process started 3 weeks ago, all these guys, they could have spoken to any of them. They didn't.
Right. I mean, the strangest one to me is Kafka, right? Because Kafka was available all last week. I don't know what he was doing. I don't know if maybe he couldn't move some things around, being the Giants offensive coordinator after they were ousted from the playoffs by the Philadelphia Eagles, almost as bad as the 49ers were ousted by the Eagles in the playoffs. But it is strange. I'll say this: if it was Sean Payton was somebody they weren't interested in, and I think that Michael Bidwill, Cardinals owner, is a gentleman. I mean, because he gave Sean Payton a ride home after their 8-hour meeting. Like he didn't have to do that. He could have had him take a longer walk of shame to the Uber and made him Uber his ass to the airport. It seemed like they had a very productive meeting. You really, in 8 hours, you talk to somebody you're not interested for 8 hours. Like at the end of it, did he say something about, Bidwill's mama or something? I don't buy into that. I'm going to do this right now on Monday here, as we're sitting here, as you outlined on Twitter. It's January 30th. We don't have really any true idea of who the next Arizona Cardinals head coach is. It's absolutely absurd, right? But there are 4 vacancies that remain open. But on this date, As things stand, I'm going to make Mickey Loomis, the Saints general manager, public enemy number one. I think he's the guy that's holding this whole goddamn thing up. Don't you? Don't you get the sense that he's the guy that's trying to hold out? He thinks he's got, this prize that he deserves to get paid out for, even though Sean Payton said, I don't want to coach here anymore. It was 16 fantastic years, 15 of which that he coached, and won a Super Bowl, had some really incredible heights that organization had never reached before, and he doesn't want to come back. You're stuck with Dennis Allen. You want to get a high draft pick. I understand that, but it doesn't make sense to hold Sean Payton hostage and just pretty much torpedo any value on the open market that he thought he had.
It shows you that the Saints, without Sean Payton, if that's true, Bowen, I tend to believe there's some truth to that. They are a low-level dumpster franchise. I retweeted this before the show started. You know who's the least amount of cap space going into next year, the NFL season? It's the Saints. They're in the negative. How many great players do they have? Who are they even paying on that team? And so they can recoup cheap assets in some draft capital, and they're opting to say, well, we need multiple ones. This needs to be, the once upon a time John Gruden trade for multiple ones. You've outlined that beautifully. It's like John Gruden was an active NFL coach. Sean Payton's been out of the league for a year. I think his value diminishes every day. And I'm going to tell you right now, I 100% believe what you're saying, and I'm going to double down. I don't think next year, I think Sean Payton, if they don't jump the gun and they don't make a deal with the Cardinals this year, I think they are going to be screwed next year, because I think they're just going to have to take whatever's out there, because Sean's going to get that itch. He wants to get paid again, right? The bills start piling up. You got to pay real estate fees, all this, that, and the other. We've talked about Fox probably pays him $2 to $5 million. It's a stark difference, especially if you're living part-time in LA compared to $15-20 million. I think he takes a job just to take it next year, and I think they get significantly less. They are losing value every day. And I put this out on Twitter. I think Dan Quinn is the heir apparent in Dallas, not Sean Payton. And I think Kellen Moore could be the heir apparent in the Chargers building. That's a very Charger-esque move. Again, if you don't know that franchise, they have never paid anybody, ever. So just to start grabbing stuff in the air like Sean Payton, the Sean Payton saga has been, I would say, 95% media driven. His buddies, people want to place him somewhere. They want to play fantasy football with Sean Payton as the next head coach. And then, not to toot our own horn here, but this show, people like Benjamin Albright are one of our favorite guests. They cut through the bullshit. Sean doesn't have a market. His market is the Cardinals. The Broncos have moved on. He was not their first choice. These other they're not hiring Sean Payton. So Mickey Loomis looks like a dipshit now when he's doing this dog and pony show, having Sean go on Fox Sports and saying, we need at least a one.
Right.
Well, maybe Michael Bidwill saying, here's pick 35, take it or leave it.
Right.
Have a good day.
It maybe the highest, right? It's absurd. I outlined it a huge, something that would trump the value of Sean Payton. It's just what classy organizations do. Look at how the Patriots handled the Rob Gronkowski situation. After Tom Brady went down to Tampa, played a season, and they brought in his guy and Rob Gronkowski, and the Patriots knew that Rob Gronkowski didn't want to play for the Patriots any longer, right? He was sick of the do-your-job mentality of it being football 24/7, 365. He was obviously going to get in, get out, but he was also he wanted to do it a different way, taste a different type of football, and he wanted to follow his guy Tom down there, and the Patriots understood that. The competitor that Bill Belichick understood that. He got a 4th-round pick for Gronk, one of the greatest tight ends of all time. The Arizona Cardinals, when Bruce Arians retired, mainly because of health reasons and who knows why, after they struggled for back-to-back seasons after an NFC Championship appearance, that they didn't hold out once he wanted to come back. He tried one season in the broadcast booth. They weren't like, we're not going to hold him hostage. In his 5 seasons, it was one of the most successful 5-season runs a coach has ever had here. We're not going to hold him hostage because, hey, we need to get as high a draft pick as we possibly can. And it just seems it's brutal. It's a brutal look on the Saints franchise. I kind of feel like it's not being talked enough about in the national media.
Yeah, absolutely. And people don't want the Cardinals to be in the press. They're still talking about the Broncos being interested in Sean Payton. That's not happening. He is not getting any of these remaining jobs. He went on Colin Cowherd's show. Bo, you sent this to me, and so did a couple other people. We thank you guys. 30 minutes he did today. They didn't even bring up the potential for him to be a head coach now. And it's almost kind of embarrassing. They telegraphed this as a courting of Sean Payton, and maybe it was to some degree in the early stages, but then maybe they were turned off by something Sean said, demands that Sean had, and especially like New Orleans, what are you doing? Like, you're going to be sitting there in October of next year with about 3 wins and a deteriorating roster. The further you get away from Sean, the further your roster is going to deteriorate. You know Dennis Allen is not the guy, and you need cheap, tangible assets, and you're blowing it right now. And even the fan base, because New Orleans people, they were in our chat Friday. We love it. Come and throw a shade, this, that, and the other. I can sense them turning on Mickey Loomis on Twitter because it's like, don't touch my head coach. He's ours. It's now pivoted, I would say, to some degree. Every time our guy Nick Underhill tweets, it's just like, we're blowing this. Get what you can. Come on, Cardinals. We want a pick or two. If they blow this and this lingers over their franchise, Cardinals will be fine. Like, right. We want Sean Payton, but they're going to get to keep their draft picks. They're in the ballpark now for some big time candidates that we're going to talk about here in a second. But man, like, I think this is going to torpedo. I think there's a possibility it could torpedo Sean Payton's career because, again, nothing's guaranteed. Everybody thought these jobs were going to open that he loved. None of them opened. And now you've got one that's open, that's willing, it sounds like, to make it work with you. And either you're holding it up or the Saints or both of you. I know fans are exhausted. We're not by any means punting on Sean Payton as the next head coach of this franchise. But, like, it's almost February, and they're bringing in new people. So, again, that's either leverage or they're genuinely not interested.
Yeah, I mean, the Cardinals with the interviews that are lined up so far, and it's just via reports, and they plan to talk on Tuesday to the Bengals defensive coordinator. I'm sorry, Mike Kafka first on Tuesday, and then you got Lou Anarumo. He's going to be your defensive coordinator for the Bengals on Wednesday, and then Callahan on Thursday. And then we hear Sean Payton say on Sunday, hey, we're going to learn a lot this week about this coaching carousel. And right now the Arizona Cardinals are loading up for some reason or not. One, to reset the search, or two, try to reset the market on Sean Payton, according to the Saints. Because I don't think it's coming down to, his price point. I think that's pretty well established. You can pretty much just go off of, we don't know what Belichick's and the top 5 coaches make, but I think you got to get somewhere in the realm of that, and then go from there. But as far as what compensation for the Saints goes, like that, if that's the main reason that this thing is being held up, or it could just be the Arizona Cardinals doing their due diligence, trying to just finish this thing up. Talk to everybody they want to, leave no stone unturned, cast a wide net, check everything you caught in that net out first, and then kind of just diagnose it and then move on from there and say, okay, here's our list. Here's our top 5. Here's our top 3. Here's our top 2. And then start. I hope there's no second round in interviews, but I joked about it with you, Johnny, today. I text like, okay, they're going to talk to these 3 guys this week, and then potentially Jonathan Gannon next week, and then start second rounds of interviews. And then the season next year will start, and then they'll name a coach. I don't know. I have no idea how this timeline's actually going to play out.
I didn't think there'd be a chance they interviewed John Gannon after the Eagles won, and then you see their plan. Their plan this week was, let's fill up almost every business day with an interview. Let's do it. And then Friday maybe can be like a reconvene day, kind of like last week. Peyton visited on Thursday, reconvene day on Friday. Like Jonathan Gannon is going to be here in Phoenix next week for the Super Bowl. Like, I would say there's a better than good chance if they're going to interview John Gannon. If I just had to guess and speculate, because we know they have interest from Ian Rappaport, from Benjamin Albright on this show. So if you're curious of where this all stands, this is their 12th interview request. Emma put together a phenomenal graphic. Producer Emma, look at this graphic for a second. And just, I wanted to call it the Ossenfort's 11, and it was going to be like Ocean's 11. And then they go and they put in a request for Mike Kafka. So now it's the sequel, which is not as good. Ocean's 12, a.k.a. Ossenfort's 12. So the gentleman on the far right, they've interviewed. It's done. And I would say, God forbid something happens, but I think Vance Joseph, our guy Avero from Denver, who they've already eliminated, Aaron Glenn, I don't consider them real candidates. Brian Flores and Sean Payton were last week. So are they still in the mix? Now on deck, we've got Mike Kafka, Brian Callahan, Lou Anarumo or Amaramo. I'm going to have to learn to say that if he becomes the next head coach. And then
Anarumo.
Anarumo. And then we think John Gannon next week. We know Frank Wright, Dan Quinn, and D'Amico Ryans likely are out. So you look at this, Bo, and it's just like, how many men can we fit on the site? How many guys for this coaching search can we fit on one graphic? It's almost laughable at this point.
It is. And then you start to, break down most of these guys, defensive guys. You try to find some sort of trend in it, and you can't find any kind of common denominator outside of like the leadership skills. I think all of these guys are pretty decent leaders of men, but yeah, it's an eclectic group, I guess it's to say. I mean, there's different backgrounds and strengths and weaknesses here. But at this point, Ossenfort's 12th, dozen, whatever you want to call it. It's nothing's shaping up to be a serious, to kind of narrow things down to serious candidates. You feel like it still remains. It's like Brian Flores, the leader in the clubhouse. Sean Payton is Tiger Woods and can come on with a hot Sunday and win the whole damn thing. Or what do we like here?
Well, here, let me ask you this, because this is a question I got earlier today. It's like, Dan Quinn, is he the only person on here that got 2 interviews, or do you even count the first Zoom session?
No, I don't count that.
I don't even.
No, I mean, it seemed like it was like I said, it was a fire drill that Saturday to try to really work in the coordinators that were working for teams that were playing that week. That included Gannon. They were able to get Quinn in for an hour Zoom interview. D'Amico Ryans ended up canceling the rest of the day of interviews from the 49ers before their Sunday game. No, I mean, I think that was just a tough week. Obviously, you install on Wednesday, and then you prepare for that week's game. And then if you've got some extra time, then you talk to the teams and prioritize which ones you want to talk to. And, Gannon didn't seem to prioritize. I was trying to find on my Twitter, somebody pointed out the post game from yesterday that Gannon said he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't buy that for a second. Prisoner of the moment. Some reporter asked him that. Like, come on, this he's going to go coach in the Super Bowl. He's going to want the attention on the game. But, I mean, there's a possibility, of course. But here's what I look at this, Bo. And I look at, it's almost like they're in sequential order here. Because, okay, the Cardinals spoke early with whom? The coaches that they didn't have to request. Vance Joseph, Frank Wright, no ties to another team. Then you look on the far left-hand side, the other 3 coaches there were from eliminated teams. Avero comes from Denver, out of the playoffs. Lions didn't make the playoffs. Brian Flores, not in the postseason with the Steelers. And then, of course, Sean Payton wasn't even a part of a team this year. So then you've got Dan Quinn and D'Amico Ryans. They requested with D'Amico. He blew them off. Dan Quinn's mixed in there, but the Cowboys were eliminated. So now it's like they're almost outside of Kafka, which you pointed out. They're almost kind of working their way down. I wonder, Bo, if they had a conversation. They said, we're going to interview as many people as we can, and we are not going to make a decision until February 10th. Mm-hmm. And we're going to put in, we're going to go through our process, and that you run the risk of losing somebody that you really like. But I do think, Bo, now they're in an advantageous position where none of their, and I don't know who their heavy hitters are anymore. I think we'd be ignorant to tell you that the favorite X, Y, and Z. But do you feel like they're in a position where they could lose any of the guys they've interviewed? I don't.
No, but I mean, to what you said to me over text today, and I'll share with everybody else, is like, as we see guys like Kellen Moore, who's not even on the market for less than 24 hours, get gobbled up. I mean, building a staff, right? That's important.
That's the big if, yeah.
Because when you look at guys like Flores, who's been out for a year, sure, he's been with the Pittsburgh Steelers staff. Does he have people in mind that he's going to be able to go and gobble up and add to his staff and build the staff that's going to be necessary for the 2023 season to feel like you can field a competitive team? I mean, the 2 coordinators now, they're just ending their season, right, with the Bengals. And then Kafka, like, he was a quarterbacks coach in Kansas City, and then he just got on a new staff in New York with Brian Dable. Like, does he have strong enough ties to where he's going to be able to bring in people and field a staff that's going to be strong enough to take the Cardinals where you want them to go, not necessarily to contend next year, but to continue to start this rebuild?
There's too much Cliff vibes with Kafka, in my opinion. He was just in the NFL. He's barely been a coach. Cliff at least has been a head coach before. Kafka, minimal experience coordinating a unit. under Andy Reid and now under Brian Dable, guys who those are their offenses. They have imprints there.
Right.
Where at least with somebody like Lou in Cincinnati, like his defense was incredible yesterday. I tweeted it out. Like, I don't know how much I'm buying him as a head coach. He's 56. He's older. But then again, Bruce Arians didn't get his first shot till he was 60. Kafka, to me, I hope this is just due diligence maybe down the line. Maybe he's a future coordinator for you if something were to happen.
You ever seen Multiplicity? It's a kind of a deep cut, right?
Michael Keaton's fantastic.
Yeah, he clones himself, and with each clone of a clone, like there's more and more.
It's watered down.
Yeah, I think Mike Kafka is completely watered down Andy Reid. Like you're too far. Like he's like fifth or sixth clone from Andy Reid. That's just that's the vibes I get from him.
It's Nagy, and then it's Kafka. It's the clone of the clone, and he's over there with goggles on, drinking Pepsi out of a 2-liter. That's what's happening with Mike Kafka. I got a wallet. Mike Mayer is saying Josina Anderson tweeted she got word Ryans has not withdrawn his name from the Broncos. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But D'Amico Ryans, he's not interviewing with the Cardinals this week. I know a lot of people still have questions about that. I think we just kind of put it to bed. We put it to bed last week. Like they didn't prioritize him early enough to get him in before the, what was that, wild card round or divisional round? I can't even remember now. And then he canceled abruptly. Like, it's not happening. D'Amico Ryan. And I also just didn't think I don't think Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are going to speak well about the Cardinals. And he's seen the Cardinals in person. And yeah, Kyler Murray and company, they lit up his defense last year, as did Colt McCoy. But this year, they got blown out by the Niners twice. To me, it's just D'Amico Houston makes too much sense. I'm going to pencil him in there. And unfortunately for Arizona, you got to look a different way, but clearly they are. They got all these guys on deck, Bo.
Yeah, and I hope that, they start to prioritize this stuff. Today really felt like they were resetting things, reshuffling the deck, but I still think that they do have a plan. Like I think if you were to set a meeting with D'Amico Ryans, just hearing the reports as far as where Houston is, it seems like they're at the goal line with D'Amico Ryans. Like, don't waste each other's time any longer. Like, talk to the people you can talk to. Hopefully Gannon's not part of it, so it doesn't get drawn out into next week. But talk to the three this week, right? Tomorrow, Kafka. Wednesday, Anarumo. And then you've got Callahan on Thursday, who will kind of break down these guys a little bit more, I think, the rest of the show. But and then assess everything on Friday, and then hopefully make a deal for Sean Payton before Super Bowl weeks begins next week.
Does it concern you, Bo? Because I was thinking about this a little bit today. Like, I trust Michael and Monty to go through their progress here over the course of these next couple of weeks. But Monti Ossenfort really never went through this, even in an assistant GM role in Tennessee, because they had a coach. And in of course, New England, they had Bill Belichick. This is a new experience for him. And so, like, I want to be sensitive to that and lenient. But as Marcus says in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much is this process annoying you guys? I think we would be more annoyed, Marcus, if the other teams, and granted, this Houston vacancy could get filled pretty quickly, but Cardinals are in a similar boat with Indy and their fan base, and Denver with their fan base. Like, we have guesses, we're trying to connect the dots here, but I mean, only Carolina has hired a coach, and so where I think there's a little bit more sense of urgency is not with the head man, because there's plenty of guys who could be the head coach. We think. It's, as Bo mentioned, putting together a staff, and Bo and company, their Senior Bowl starts this week. I mean, you're not going to have your head coach for the Senior Bowl.
No, you're not. I mean, and you're going to have probably leftover scouts from the previous regime, right? And that's something that due to the fact that you wanted to make the decision on Black Monday to get rid of your GM officially, Steve Keim officially resigned the previous week, but you went with the interim co-tandem before you hired Monti Ossenfort the next week. I'm sure he's hired Dave Sears as his assistant GM, who's got a lot of experience there in Mobile, and I'm sure they'll have a pretty strong contingent there scouting the players. But yeah, you're not going to be able to work in concert with whoever your coaching staff is next season. You're not going to be able to kind of throw questions and data at their way and say, hey, what do you think about this prospect's intangible size, athleticism, what he put on tape in Mobile or at the Shrine Bowl or wherever they may be scouting? Yeah, that puts yourself kind of in a hole, and you continue to put yourself in a hole. But also when you look at it, I mean, Sean Payton not tied to a team. Nobody's knocking down his door right now. There can always be Denver that could try to get back into it with deep pockets and just really having nowhere else to go. And then, I mean, Houston's going to lock in a job. So that's 2 of the 5 jobs. Indy is a mess. They're not even in the same conversation as far as who they're looking at for head coaching candidates. So like, if Brian Flores and Sean Payton are in your top 5 or whatever, you got 2 candidates there, and then maybe a couple of these guys that you're interviewing this week. I guess why should there be a sense of urgency? So I'm not trying to talk myself into it. I just think, what Sean Payton said on Sunday, he was adamant. He said, no. We're going to learn a lot this week. And he also pointed to that it's a different coaching cycle now. It's different as far as what the rules are in place with the NFL, when you can interview guys. And obviously heavy is the crown as far as these successful teams. People want to try to cherry pick your coaches and coordinators for become their next head coach, next offensive coordinator, whatever it may be. And because of the new NFL rules, I mean, you have a tough time talking to every candidate you want to talk to. So that's what they're dealing with. And it seems like Peyton and his group, they're content with it. They seem confident, right? I mean, I didn't see any panic from Sean Payton, but also like with all this kind of smoke screening or whatever it may be, you also have 2 sides trying to negotiate and iron something out, regardless of who the head coaching candidate is. So, I mean, there's so many different things at play, but this coaching carousel, I mean, they have significantly slowed things down as far as how quick it moves.
I like this comment from Nick in the chat. Is Michael Bidwill waiting to build this up because the Super Bowl's in Arizona and wants to put a statement out to pump juice into the team? Listen, I don't think that's the worst idea. And then we talked about it last night on our audio-only pod. It's like if Sean was going to announce he was going back to Fox, yesterday was the platform to do it because he's not going to do it Super Bowl Sunday. And I don't think they have a broadcast next weekend because there's no games. I mean, I don't know about the Pro Bowl, but like that would have been the time to do it. And because he was so adamant, it just seems strange now. And that's why you cannot dispute a leverage play. We've got RV Davey in the chat, $2 super chat. Thank you so much, RV. Fair to say Peyton is out at this point? Of course not. No. Of course not. If it was out, then Sean would be going back to Fox and the Cardinals would hire. The only time it's out is if Sean gets hired somewhere else or the Cardinals hire somebody else. That's it. I like, unless we get a tweet from somebody, an insider, Rap Sheet's really plugged in with the organization. He broke the news about Ossenfort. He's broken the Kyler news. If he puts out a tweet and the Cardinals in the final stages of hiring Brian Flores, then it's over, right? Or Sean Payton's going to Denver, then it's over. But until then, I mean, goodness, I think this show, and again, not tooting our horn here, but we thought that even after the Cardinals didn't schedule the interview with Sean Payton, they were going to schedule it, and they did. But it was like a week late. So maybe we should take our old kind of sage advice here and be like, okay, everybody, we live in a reactionary time. Everybody's ready to punt on Sean this morning because they're interviewing a couple more people. Like every time we thought we were out, they pulled us back in, right? It's the Undertaker meme. We're a little bit back from the dead every time we feel like it's dead and buried. And on DraftKings right now, Bo, we're going to talk about the opposing openings and how that could affect Arizona. But I want to tell everybody, DraftKings right now, Sean Payton still plus 120 to be the next head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. You can check out DraftKings, all the promotions, all the props ahead of Super Bowl Sunday. They're ready for you. It's plug and play. Coin flips, Gatorade colors, what have you. Everything is rocking and rolling. And thank goodness my DraftKings pick of the week, the Eagles minus 2.5. Fly Eagles Fly took care of business against San Francisco. I've already started dabbling on DraftKings ahead of the Super Bowl. You can do. All you got to do, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use that promo code PHNX. Get this. New customers can bet a mere $5 on Super Bowl 57. Get $200 back in free bets instantly. That's only at DraftKings Sportsbook with promo code PHNX. I want to remind everybody, minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void in Ohio. See those show notes for details. Again, you can't get anywhere else some of these props on DraftKings right now. It's the only place you guys should be gambling, dabbling ahead of Super Bowl 57. And in the meantime, take some extra funds and go play around on DraftKings with the offseason special, something we love to do. And the only team that's available to bet on, the next head coach, are the Arizona Cardinals. Broncos gone, Texans gone, Indy's off the board. It's just the Cardinals, and it's just DraftKings.
The next couple of days are going to be flying by the seat of my pants. Not too sure what my schedule is going to look like, but Picking Spreads was asking, going to Senior Bowl. Yes, I am. Me and Shane Diefenbach. We're going to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. That means airport beers tomorrow. Top 5 beer, in my opinion, especially when it's Four Peaks and you can get it there at the Phoenix Sky Harbor. You can get yourself a couple Four Peaks, get yourself nice and loose for the flight. And I was thinking yesterday too, it was tough to beat, Johnny. I was sitting there watching the conference championships games. The sun was shining. We had the doors open, the windows open. And I had myself the Joy Bus Wow Wheat. It's such a great day drinking beer. I mean, you just got that in your hand. You're watching the game. You can put back a couple of them, 1, 2, maybe 6 of them, and you're feeling good for a nice little Sunday. Or you could have a Kilt Lifter. Kilt Lifter pairs well with NFL football as well. Hop Knot IPA. You're an IPA person. You like the pale ales. Well, you can't go wrong. Four Peaks has something for everybody, especially those who love to crack a beer and watch the game. You got one more on tap. Go find your favorite Four Peaks beer. Share the gift of beer with your friends at your Super Bowl party from Four Peaks. Four Peaks beer. Can't beat it. Got to be 21 years or older. Check out their 8th Street location as well. It's more than a brewery. It's got great food. Their menu goes deep. It's so delicious, from their appetizers to their entrees to their desserts. And, of course, they got everything you want as a beer drinker. They got the barrel-aged stuff, which is so smooth. You got to check that out as well. Four Peaks. Check out everything. They've got all their products, fourpeaks.com. I even saw that they have a Crowler Ranger program. If you want to get a big old Crowler filled up with your favorite Four Peaks beer, they got a great deal going on. Crowler Rangers, like Power Rangers, but Crowler Rangers in 2023. They're doing an enrollment right now. You can find more at fourpeaks.com.
Eric Smith, the $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Eric, for supporting the channel and the show in that way. Love the show. We love you, Eric. Would you give a shout out to Honolulu? Hell yeah, brother. I would love to just do a show in Honolulu. Can we go and do that after this coaching search is over? Maybe this summer. Beautiful place. Thank you, my guy. We appreciate the support. We appreciate all the support here in the chat. Let's talk about the ever-changing landscape of the coaching search, Arizona and not. And I want to start with our beloved DMVR peeps, the Denver Broncos, who every day it feels like, despite the media darlings, the national media loves the Broncos. We get it. They're in a tough spot right now because it seems like with each passing hour, they get told no to again. At least the Cardinals haven't kind of put out a feeler that, hey, you're our number one candidate. Goodbye. You're gone. And so we got this from Woody Page before the show, Bo, about their interest in DeMeco Ryans. It was said last week, DeMeco Ryans was their top candidate. Well, DeMeco Ryans tells the Broncos, not interested. He was their third number one choice in a row that they missed out. Of course, Jim Harbaugh told them no. They flew to Ann Arbor last week and tried to convince Harbaugh, throw a bunch of cash at him. He said no. Our guy Benjamin Albright was working the radio spots this morning. He gave this kind of nice rundown of where things sit, and he's been adamant that Sean Payton to the Broncos is not happening, that the interview, whatever it is, they didn't vibe together. And so this is from Benjamin Albright, of course, friend of the program, NFL Insider, saying that David Shaw out, defensive coordinator Avero out, Jim Caldwell out, and Raheem Morris is out. So what does that leave? Quinn, Harbaugh, both said they're going back to their respective jobs, but could potentially be pried away. We'll see if that happens. Texans, DeMeco Ryans, we all feel like that's just a matter of time in the coming days. Peyton didn't impress. So is Peyton not impressed with the Broncos, or the Broncos not impressed with Peyton? Doesn't matter at this point. I think there's some media bad blood there. I'd love to see it. So the expanded candidates for the Broncos, Bo, looking a little familiar. Jonathan Gannon, Brian Callahan, and Mike Kafka. And it does feel like when we get the official word on any of those interviews, like if you want to say the Cardinals are competing with the Broncos, it would be for this renewed wave of candidates. Like the Broncos and the Cardinals now are seemingly in a new sandbox this week, while the Colts are over there kind of on the jungle gym doing their own thing, Bo.
Falling off the jungle gym, right? Injuring themselves.
Eating grass.
Yeah, no, exactly. Just doing some weird things off in the weird part of the playground. But yeah, I mean, it does seem. And then look, you pit the Arizona Cardinals versus the Denver Broncos, and obviously the Broncos and Cardinals have some appealing parts of their roster and not so appealing parts of the roster and work to be done. And then you look at the quarterback position, right? Two polarizing figures as far as Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, who could be out as long as mid-season, according to Ian Rappaport yesterday. And then Russell Wilson's going to be washed for the entire rest of his career. So, I don't know, you're weighing those, right? You got a 26-year-old soon to be 26-year-old quarterback, a soon to be 35-year-old washed quarterback, if everything's all equal, who do you want to go to? Unless you feel like Kyler Murray is damaged goods. But I think that's if you think you're worth any lick of a head coach, you think you can turn somebody with that skill set around.
You're going to get destroyed in that division. The Chiefs are the modern day Montana Walsh, and I think the Chargers got better today with Kellen Moore, and the Raiders could get Tom
better
Brady
by firing Lombardi. It didn't matter who they brought in, but they brought in Kellen Moore.
That could be our future offensive coordinator now. Don't talk about my guy Joe like that. This is coming from Zach Stevens, our guy at DMVR. Give him a follow at Zach Stevens DMVR. He says Adam Schefter on 104.3 The Fan believes Jim Harbaugh is no longer a candidate for the Broncos. I don't believe he's a candidate anymore for the Denver Broncos. That was just posted while we were going live. So again, everybody who thinks money can change everything, it's that thing in life. You don't try to get happier than happy, and he's happy at Michigan. And I think he was only going to come back to the NFL for the right reason, for the right team, and maybe to get some leverage on Michigan to up his salary. So I think the Broncos, that their coaching search has probably been the most disheartening, because Carolina, didn't really know what direction they were going to go outside of offense, and they always kind of had Steve Wilkes, unfortunately for Steve, in their back pocket. Indy, if they hire Jeff Saturday, that's DEFCON 5 for their fan base. But I mean, Houston probably unfairly is going to be gifted D'Amico with a nostalgia factor. But Denver is the true, hey, you guys have had a bunch of head coaches and that hasn't gone well. You just had a one and done. I just saw somebody in the chat say, is it too late to rehire Cliff? And I know he was saying that tongue in cheek, which is hilarious, but at least Michael Bidwill, they gave Cliff 4 years. Nathaniel Hackett was one and done. And Vic Fangio does not have complimentary. Right. Vic Fangio doesn't have complimentary things to say about the Broncos. The Broncos are damaged goods right now. And however you want to put it, the hierarchy of available jobs, the Cardinals are above the Broncos. And I think all these candidates have kind of shown you that.
Peyton Manning was 6 seasons ago. Is that right? No, longer than that. 7 seasons? Wasn't it 2016? And then John Elway was even longer before that. And they're using that as a crutch, this proud franchise. And they just said there hasn't been a whole lot to root for. And they're holding on to this for some reason. And I don't want to crush them, but who's the trendy coach this week that's going to be the top candidate? Because
it's going to say no to them.
It was Harbaugh, it was Peyton, it was D'Amico Ryans, and now who? I mean, it's got to be tough. But when you hitch your wagon and you go all in and you take as bad of a beat as they did with Russell Wilson as they did last year, and then some because he's under contract for the next 5 seasons, it's tough to get out from under. I mean, we talk about NFL and ownership stability. We don't know too much about that ownership. It's new to the scene. But reports of an owner who's hunting when they're doing their job search, and you're not going to report to George Payton. You're going to report to Penner, and it's too many cooks in the kitchen. You're seeing when they were just reporting on this job, and as far as who's going to be atop the trash heap, as far as the 5 vacancies, people pointed to Denver. And man, were they off? They didn't peel back that onion at all and realize that it's a mess and why it's a mess. And Arizona Cardinals still have to put themselves in a position. I feel like if they have to figure out who their candidates are. I'm surprised we haven't heard anything more about you can look at the DraftKings Sportsbook app and see that it's Flores and Peyton and Vance Joseph still in there, but he continues to drop like crypto stock. He's now down to plus 600. You saw the Gannon get on there. Callahan's on there now.
Yeah, they're all plus 1,000 or above. Let me ask you a Vance question, because I think, is it in poor taste? Because, again, we're not in unprecedented territory. I had to look this up. So Mike McDaniel was hired February 6th last year. Okay. And I think right before that, Doug Peterson was hired February 4th. So we're almost on that timeline. Miami was the last opening to get filled. Is it a bad look for Michael Bidwill and Monti Ossenfort to wait to hire another head coach and then let him go through his staff and fire Vance Joseph mid to late February, and maybe there aren't any DC openings available? Wouldn't it make more sense? Because we're going to talk about it later. The Cardinals tight end coach just left for Detroit.
Right.
Wouldn't it make sense to fire all these guys? Or is it genuinely, hey, we're going to get a new head coach and they're going to decide your fate? But the longer this goes, the less openings these guys are going to have.
No, let those guys keep their job and continue to earn a paycheck. And they're not keeping them from getting other jobs, right?
That's
Because
true. Yeah.
their pass rush coach, outside linebackers coach, went to Illinois, right? He went to University of Illinois, took a job there, basically the same position, or he might have gotten a defensive coordinator job there. And then, their tight ends coach, who took over kind of the offensive line coaching, coordinating duties after Sean Kugler was removed last season. He went to Detroit. So they're not keeping people in the building. They're letting them go find their way if they wanted to. So I have no problem with that. I mean, it's going to be the same thing as Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. It's like, it depends on who comes in there and what their luggage looks like, right? Is it Louis or is it Samsonite or something worse? Is it trash bags? Hopefully it's not Vance Joseph and trash bags.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Now, what about what do you make of this situation with Indianapolis? Because it sounds like, Adam Schefter was on Pat McAfee and he made his rounds and he said, well, with Arizona and interviewing all these candidates, that could potentially close the book on Sean Payton because they're looking elsewhere. We're not of that mindset. Right. And I think if you listen to the clip and how he kind of contextualizes it, he's guessing. But with Indy, it does feel like
paying attention in that interview too. Did you notice that?
No one seems to want to pay attention with Sean Payton and the Cardinals, but with Indianapolis in particular, like there's like true life is happening with Indy fans. Like Jim Irsay's daughter is sitting in on the interview panel, and they're, I guess, trying to weasel their way, even though they own the team, for Jeff Saturday to be the next head coach. It's like they're both stiff arming. They see the Ring of Honor name with Jeff Saturday. They're like, no, this has to be our guy. And then Chris Ballard's like keeps bringing in these candidates, and they're basically trying to convince Jim Irsay to hire Jeff Saturday. I mean, that's what the Cardinals are up against right now. So maybe we should be like, shit, take your time, guys. Never mind. Yeah. This is a laughing stock.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's behind, at least not in the national media's perspective or opinion, like the secret's out about Denver, right? And then there's no secret to the dysfunction in Indy, in that Peyton Manning and maybe Bill Polian and some smarter football men who had been there previous, having the number one pick with Andrew Luck, like, was a crutch for that organization for so long. And they made the right decision. Frank Reich was a pretty good coach for a little bit. And Chris Ballard, I think, did a really good job there as a general manager for a while, but you're handcuffed by who ownership is and who wants to work with that ownership. And it's just complete three-ring circus most of the time. So I mean, the sense of urgency, it just remains like the sense of urgency was there to find the general manager and then put the plan in place and then follow through with that plan and just be confident that there's going to be enough smart enough and talented football people out there to hire for your head coach and the rest and fill out the staff. So I think if they felt like they were behind the eight ball or like that they were going to put themselves in a tough position, they would have made a move earlier, but they don't get that sense. Hopefully they're reading the room, just like I feel like we're trying to read the room.
A lot of people are kind of speculating that Brian Flores could be out because of the fact that he was interviewed, if you remember, a week ago today, right? Last Monday they had Brian Flores in and they conducted an interview, and they'll by the time they could potentially meet with him again, they'll have met with 5 people: Dan Quinn, Sean Payton, and then the 3 candidates this week. Do you think that they need to have a sense of urgency with somebody like Flores to at least bring him back and say, second interview, let's talk again? Or do you think this is a scenario in which, like, the further away they get from those initial candidates, I'm talking about Vance, I'm talking about Avero, Aaron Glenn, maybe Brian Flores now, the further you get away from those guys, the less likely that they're going to hire them? Are you of that mindset? And also, are the Cardinals treading on kind of shaky grounds here with Minnesota waiting in the wings to make him their next defensive coordinator?
No, I mean, it seems like the only guy that got a second interview was Quinn, and there were multiple reports that Quinn was going to be not the candidate in the conversation to be one of the top candidates for the Cardinals, and they needed to have, as soon as he became available, they talked to him. And like, as we said earlier in the show, we felt like the fire drill 1-hour Zoom meeting that they had wasn't sufficient enough. I don't know if they have to go through the NFL and they have to just qualify it as a second interview. But that's the only guy that's had a second interview, right? And it seems like they're getting through slowly but surely these first interviews. And then once they do, they'll if they haven't made a decision, if they haven't worked Mickey Loomis and the Saints down, or they don't feel comfortable with who they want to hire at that point, then they would, begrudgingly have a second round of interviews.
We've seen odds change slightly for Payton, plus 120 to plus 125. Again, we could be in a position where things go well with a Cincinnati coordinator, or God forbid, Mike Kafka this week, and they move quickly. Those odds can change quickly. We know over plus 1,000 for Sean Payton last week whittled down to just plus 125 on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. It's interesting, Bo. We haven't really even been able to talk any tangible football news as it relates to this roster, because everything is predicated on who they hire. And we touched a little bit on it on the audio only show we had last night, but the Kyler Murray situation and the fact that he's got, an 8-12 timeline return, and people are kind of blowing that out of proportion. Oh, he could miss so much of the season. I mean, we're not going to have a good idea where Kyler is until the spring into the summer. Right. But I also feel like I can't get too worked up. And I mentioned this to you last night, Bo, about Kyler Murray until I know who the head coach is. Because if I know I'm getting Sean Payton, I know I can get Jameis Winston and we can be competitive, right? And a lot of people may scoff at that. Look at Sean Payton's resume with quarterbacks, backups or otherwise. But if I hire Brian Flores and his offensive coordinator is, I don't know who they would bring in, Anthony Lynn, I'm gonna be a little bit more skeptical. What's going on here? Can you manufacture enough offense without Kyler? And so it just feels like Kyler and everything going on with him is on hold, and speculation is on hold as to who's going to be the quarterback to start next year until I know who the head coach is. I just can't move on. I can't move on from anything until I know who the head coach is.
Right. And that was part of the plan, right? And Bidwill laid it out. It's GM, it's coach, and then you figure out what the roster is going to look like, the impending free agents you want to bring back. And then of course you start to evaluate, the players on the roster, right? And that includes Kyler Murray, who we've seen, a couple things here and there. We saw him sitting on the table, undergoing some sort of treatment on his surgically repaired knee, which was a torn ACL and then torn meniscus. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not going to put the cart before the horse either. I mean, as far as where the Arizona Cardinals are in this entire process, but when you say Anthony Lynn, if it's Brian Flores, Anthony Lynn, it's what's your ceiling with that team year one?
Yeah.
I don't think it's much higher than what it was this year. Do you go from 4 wins to 5 wins with that duo? With Flores? I mean, I know what Flores was able to do with not a whole lot in his first year in Miami. And he won 5 games of the 16, and then he won double-digit games, and then he was 9-8 his final season. But I mean, that doesn't inspire a lot of hope,
right?
I mean, to where the sense of urgency, if you go with a guy like Flores, you'd hope that they have somebody in mind for the play calling duties on the offensive side of the football that's going to get to you where you want to go.
Yeah, you better be connecting the dots and the puzzle pieces right now to fill out the rest of your staff, because again, I mean, this week it's a little bit more refreshing. You would feel a little bit better. Callahan, is an offensive guy. Kafka's an offensive guy. Lou would probably try to pick some people from the Bengals. You would have a direct pipeline from Cincinnati's success to fill out, I would imagine, the rest of your staff. People would get promoted, and maybe we'd see some names emerge. But with Kafka especially, I'm just, I just don't have enough confidence he'd be able to put it together. Joel, our guy Joel in the chat asking $4.99 super chat. Thank you so much, Joel. When do you hit the panic button for the Cardinals taking too long to hire a head coach? By the end of next week? I would say so. I think by the end of next week, which is, I mean, this Friday, pulling up my calendar, is the 3rd. So we're going to be on Radio Row next week. Next Friday is the 10th. Yeah. I would say, I mean, goodness, nothing's impossible, but you're not going to try to do it the weekend of the Super Bowl. And after the Super Bowl, that's too late. So we're in the final days of this, whether we want to believe it or not. Now, the frustrating part is, Bo, we're not going to know a coach until at minimum Friday, because they've got interviews for the next 3 days. Yeah. I think a lot of us were anxious, they could hire a coach this weekend. They could make an announcement today, business days. But the problem with lining up your schedule is you're not going to make a decision. You're not going to have an idea until at least Friday.
I think next week is a perfect target to hire a coach, bring him into town, celebrate him. Super Bowl, it's going to be Super Bowl week leading up to the big game. Everybody from the football world is going to be just ascending into the valley. Why not set it up and have, this big celebration, hopefully for exciting new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals franchise. Yeah. But, You got the 3 guys this week, right? So far, you got Callahan on Thursday, bringing it home as of right now, as it stands. I got to imagine after Callahan interviews the third of the 3 guys, that you evaluate where you are and then maybe start to make a move on who the next guy is leading your franchise on Friday. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, shoot, unless you're like, man, we really want to speak to Jonathan Gannon. If you wait to hire you wait to talk to Jonathan Gannon until Monday, you need to hire him on Monday or Tuesday. But then you can't parade him around because he's prepping for the Super Bowl. But it needs to come out that Jonathan Gannon is your preferred candidate and you're going to hire him. But again, they haven't talked to him. We don't think they've talked to him yet. Benjamin Albright was on our show. He broke that news about a week ago that they were interested in talking to Jonathan Gannon, but they have not put the request in place.
Right.
Now, do I think, Bo, it's Cincinnati not won yesterday and Philadelphia had lost, or Cincinnati did win, they'd probably be talking to John Gannon today or tomorrow. Right. But I just feel like the timing for that, never say never. He's in town. Mm-hmm. He's getting ready for the Super Bowl, but it feels like I keep wanting to say it, like the pool of candidates are who they're going to hire. They're going to hire within this pool. But I mean, they got an open day to talk to a coach on Friday, so maybe they fill that up too. Or maybe that's the day. Maybe Friday's the day that they bring in Sean Payton one final time to cross the T's and dot the I's and say, Sean, let's make this happen. New Orleans, let's hammer this out this weekend. Something that I thought maybe they were doing this weekend, but to no avail.
Right. And it sounded like Payton was very understanding of that, with the idea that he wants to coach again. It seems like he's got the itch. Anarumo, Callahan, Kafka. I think you and we both agree on Kafka, not a legitimate candidate for this job.
Yeah.
As far as the 2 Bengals coordinators, who do you like?
Callahan only because he's an offensive guy, but the better unit has been Lou's defense. Mm-hmm. But I've seen Vic Fangio coach the shit out of defenses and then become a head coach and it not go well. I'm a little bit leery on defensive head coaches that are that old. Offensive coaches, you can get Bruce Arians once in a while. You can get Tom Coughlin once in a while, right? But I'm concerned a little bit. And we've got, I think Joe Banner kind of went on a Twitter rant today saying that would be a terrible hire for the Arizona Cardinals.
Anarumo?
He was kind of ripping. He was like, this would be a terrible move. So who knows? Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like somebody that Kyler Murray would be ecstatic to work with.
But see, that's where I'm going to push back on you. Like that. I love Kyler and I want him
to
succeed.
I want somebody to challenge him, but if you're going to hire Tommy Lee Jones, this old curmudgeony old dude.
Yeah, it's like Harrison Ford or Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah. Callahan would be my preferred option, but there are Sundays, Bo, I turn into the Bengals offensively and I'm like, this offense isn't any good.
Agreed.
And then Zach Taylor's an offensive guy. So again, I think Bo and I are on the same page. I don't want to speak for Bo. If they don't get Sean Payton, my preferred candidate has and will continue to be Brian Flores. He's been a head coach. He's won as a head coach. He's no nonsense. And he's got a relationship with the GM, so you don't have to worry about them drafting players and then misinformation like Vance did with Cliff and Keim. That to me is the perfect seamless transition outside of Sean Payton. But maybe they've got something else in mind. Who is your preferred candidate outside of Sean Payton? I'll put you on the spot right now.
No, I feel like it's Payton and it's Flores, right? And then once you start to kind of look at the crop after that, it's pretty thin as far as, you got Big Lou, you've got Callahan, you've got Glenn. So I was looking at it, I mean, because it was interesting throughout the season. The Bengals were dominant in the second half defensively, right? To finish,
they've been fantastic.
They were awesome, right? And that's a true testament to teams being able to finish. And I like that, right? And then I looked at, that the bottom of this list where Cincinnati was 5th, right? And San Francisco was, I believe, 3rd. All the way, the worst team in the second half defensively. Do you know who it was?
The Arizona Cardinals.
The Arizona Cardinals. And then you know who was the second worst?
The Detroit Lions.
Detroit Lions. That's right. 2 guys who are still in the running for Arizona Cardinals head coaching position.
Oh, and I didn't collaborate on that, by the way. We're just in sync because we know what each other does not want. I like this comment here. We don't have the Bengals offensive personnel.
Exactly right.
One of the most loaded offensive teams. Hayden Hurst is an afterthought. They've got 2 top 10 receivers. Jamar Chase is unbelievable. They're not paying anybody yet. Joe Mixon's fantastic. The Cardinals
I thought that Callahan did a really good job, him and Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor. Obviously, that collaboration for that offense without Jamar Chase for a while. He had the hip injury this year. And obviously what they were able to do last year, their run to the Super Bowl, make big plays despite, a 9-sack performance by the Titans. They won that game. 3 picks from Tannehill helped, but they made enough plays. But you think about it, it's like you got Burrow, you got Chase, you got T. Higgins, you had Tyler Boyd. Like, you have playmakers. So, like, at some point, especially when the score's a little bit lower, right? And it's like 2020, like, they just needed a few big plays, and they were made by playmakers, right? Yeah. It wasn't so much, hey, he out-schemed him on this one. So I'm a little hesitant there for sure.
Yeah. Callahan, to me, like, he also, it's like, I am immune to people who are affiliated with Peyton Manning, like, have success. Like, Adam Gase was fantastic with Peyton Manning. He was a shithead coach. Like, go look up videos. Brian Callahan was like basically not an intern, but he was like a special advisor, coordinator, not a coordinator, but he just helped out with those Bronco offenses when Manning was there. And Manning loves him. And it's just like, you didn't do anything there. Like, that was Peyton Manning's offense. That was Gary Kubiak's team. Like, I don't want to hear that you worked with Peyton Manning. That's like Kafka. And that's like, what's his name? Getting the Bears job, Nagy working with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Like, no, thank you. Now, again,
maybe it's Patty, right?
Right. Maybe Callahan is a great leader of men. And that's really what you're looking for. Yes, you want an offensive savant if he's the head coach, but and an offensive background. But to me, it's just like, stop. I don't want to hear that you worked with Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are the package. Everybody else, it's watered down. I want to get to the super sticker. Dung Na Lick 1 $2 super sticker. Thank you so much. We appreciate all of the super chats today. And if you got a little disposable income, can I recommend Underdog Fantasy, friends? It is the best, most user-friendly daily fantasy you can find. Super fun to play with your friends. A new way to throw some cash and follow your favorite money with your fave players using Underdog Fantasy. Push the promo code PHNX on Underdog Fantasy. Pushing in PHNX. It's fantastic. It's the only place I play daily fantasies. Draft your team against 5 of your buddies, and the highest scoring squad for the night wins that cold, hard cash. And again, NFL, it's so sad. Too bad we only have one game left. You can do it on the Super Bowl, but in the meantime, dabble on a little NBA action. We've got Phoenix Suns cooking. Cam Johnson doing well. We got Devin Booker supposedly returning this week. Draft 6 NBA players with no positional limits. It's fantastic. Like, will Devin Booker, in his return, hit the higher of points? I'm so glad I can say that again. It's so easy to get started. All you got to do, Bo and friends, go to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the app to your smartphone. Sign up with promo code, you guessed it, PHNX. Underdog is going to match your first deposit up to $100. So if you're thinking, I want some free cash, you got it. Underdog's got you covered. Put in a hundy, Bo, slam in a hundy, and you get a free hundy to bet with on Underdog Fantasy. Get in on the action today.
I'm already looking at some tasty Super Bowl higher lowers. They got some good rivals that you can do where you just pit 2 players against each other and say, is Jerick McKinnon going to have, more rushing yards than Jalen Hurts? And they've got some interesting things here. Underdog Fantasy goes hard, higher or lower. I was playing it all season long, loved it. Already got Patrick Mahomes. You can do higher or lower than half an interception. Is he going to throw a pick in the game? Is he going to go higher or lower than 287.5 passing yards? You can, if you think it's definite higher, hammer it. If you think it's lower, hammer the lower as well. Also, what you need to hammer is into your web browser, morefurniture.com. Find yourself some new furniture for your pad, living room, bedroom, dining room, your kids' bedrooms. You got your office, your entertainment centers that you want to hook up, and you got a President's Day sale coming up near the end of the month. You can get 25% off already. More furniture, but you can get your pad looking great, more functional, looking better out there, getting your feng shui set up. More Furniture's got everything that you want. Visit More Furniture, Cross Streets, 44th Street, McDowell. Right now, use the promo code PHNX. You can get free delivery and installation on any purchase, $999 or more. This is not available online, so you got to go to the store, 44th Street in McDowell. Limited time only offer. It's valid through tomorrow, exclusively to our PHNX listeners. Take advantage now. Go do that. And then after January 31st, go to morefurniture.com, morfurniture.com.
Continuing the conversation here, Bo Brock headed to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama tomorrow. I'm so thankful that my guy gets to go and come back and not miss any surprise press conferences because, again, we were under the impression we'd have a head coach by now.
As soon as I take off tomorrow that they're going to make a hire. They are. I'm going to be stuck. I'm going to be in Mobile, Alabama, and the press conference is going to be going on Wednesday, and your happy ass is going to be there welcoming Sean Payton to the Valley.
I won't be happy unless you're there. Nick in the chat saying, I want to hear Johnny scream his ass off when they hire Sean Payton.
Me too.
I will do it live on the air. If and when it happens, you will get the unfiltered audio, dialogue, what have you. We will be as real as possible because, again, this is something for those of you who are new to the show. First of all, welcome, like, and subscribe. We've been on this train since late October. And as Bo's outlined before, this has gone from a fun fantasy pipe dream to, like, are the Cardinals the last team standing, and are they in a position to say no and to use some leverage against him? And then I think that's an interesting discussion topic, Bo, because you think about saving face if you're Sean Payton, saving face if you're the New Orleans Saints. Like, is there a scenario in which they can go through this process, not be chosen, and for the Saints and Sean Payton to save face, or are they going to have to backtrack on some things? Because right now you've had multiple openings. Everybody but Indy has interviewed him. Mm-hmm. And now he doesn't even get a second interview. And you've got whispers from our guy, Benjamin Albright, that he doesn't have a market and he's not the first choice. And so I think about just kind of butchering this entire process if you're the parties involved, that being Sean and Mickey Loomis.
Well, you can butcher it, and at the end of the day, you can look at whatever the compensation may be if he does take a job for the Saints. And you likely say, oh, it's not as much as I thought their asking price was, even though the biggest mistake was being able to go and be transparent with the public, with Sean Payton saying he talked to Mickey Loomis and on Colin Cowherd saying he wants a mid to late first. It's like, okay, that may be what he wants, but let's be realistic here. Outside of John Gruden, nobody's really fetched that high of a draft return for a head coach before. So, I don't think the Saints relinquishing Sean Payton would save them more face than if they held on and stood pat if he wanted to go coach elsewhere and they didn't let him do it and held him hostage. No, I think that if they get less in return than initially thought, that's not the worst of all cases. Like, the worst one would be if the Cardinals were in a position to hire him and they balked at his salary asking price, if it wasn't too crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we started this process and it was called the Sean Payton sweepstakes. You remember that? And a bunch of teams got an early head start because they didn't have head coaches. They fired Lovie Smith the day of the season finale. They could start right away. Denver fired Hackett, remember, 2 weeks before the end of the season because of that embarrassing loss on Nickelodeon to Baker Mayfield. And then you've got Indy, who had Jeff Saturday as an interim. Everybody could have started that process of courting, and I think it was a little bit self-serving. And I love Sean. I hope he becomes the head coach of this team with everything, with every fiber of my being. I want him to be the next head coach. But man, you got to have a lot of gall to go on national TV time after time and to have all these media mouthpieces do your talking points for you. Like, Sean wouldn't consider you. You're an embarrassment. You'd be so lucky to have Sean Payton. And it's now like every article you see is like, is time running out for Sean Payton and the Saints to salvage something? And I think there's some ownership, maybe congregation. I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Bidwill's talking to these other owners and just like, hey, let's let them sweat this out because they're not going to dictate these terms. There are other candidates. We just outlined 11 other candidates that they could potentially hire. Some of them good, some of them meh. But these other teams now, I mean, I think it just speaks to the fact that no team was quick to jump on Sean's salary, the compensation that was owed to New Orleans, the fact that they wanted to go through their due diligence. I would imagine this has not gone at all how he and his people thought. No way.
It most definitely didn't. But what the Cardinals, hopefully their plan is playing out how they want it to, and we'll see how far this thing gets before that becomes more of a bigger story, right? Is it next week? Does it become the talk of Radio Row, like your Kyler Murray report that he scrubbed his Instagram did last year? Is that the next story? That the Saints are potentially holding their most celebrated and successful coach hostage because they want to max out the draft capital they get in return. I'm I'm not positive that it's the best look for them. And, Sean Payton, I'm sure him and his representation definitely felt like this was going to be a hotter coaching carousel for them. But the way it just played out, I found it hard to believe that he didn't impress in Denver, and unless it's just that, like, is there too much arrogance coming from ownership and maybe the front office that didn't want to relinquish power to Peyton to say that he just didn't impress him? I mean, all you have to do is look at the resume. Like,
well, I wonder if he wanted to be wined and dined, and then there's only one team that's done that so far. He had a Skype Zoom call with Houston that he went on Colin Cowherd and let him know, and Colin conveyed it was like laughable. It was unprofessional.
You can see the dysfunction on Zoom. That's what he said.
Right. Yeah. With Houston. And then I think Denver probably met with him and are treating him like everybody else, which he does not think of himself like that. And probably had him in for a couple of hours, and it did not go well. The interview did not go well. And then he goes to Carolina and he meets with them, and they immediately hire somebody else. They immediately pivot to Shane Steichen and Frank Wright and Kellen Moore, and then they hire Frank Wright. And so he meets with the Cardinals now, and he goes through, a 7+ hour day, and he's seen leaving with the owner. Still nobody wants to talk about that. And now they're making Sean and everybody kind of sweat it out. And I'm of the mindset that it's not going to be better for Sean next year. I'm firmly in the camp that
he's going to want to go to Washington. I mean, think about who's in the conversation to fire their coach next season.
You're going to go to Cleveland. If what's his name, you're going to be paired with Deshaun Watson. This is the best opportunity. We've stood by that. We are not being homers for this. We're as objective as any podcast supporting this franchise can be. You are nuts if you think, even if you don't love Kyler Murray, if you come and work for Michael Bidwill, you're going to be paid a premium. You get to live on the West Coast, basically. You get to play in the diminishing NFC where you dominated, and you've got all your draft capital ready to go and some cap space because the cap just went up to about $230 million. It's going to be a fascinating case study because all this is going to come out, Bo, over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks. If inevitably they don't hire Sean Payton, we're going to know who did what and who was exposed. And I will relish if they get him, but I will also relish to some extent the pain and suffering of the Saints fans who were counting their draft chips before they had it. And now it's like lingering over. And poor Dennis Allen's got to deal with this BS for another year.
Yeah. It would, I think they would be doing themselves all parties involved, a tremendous disservice if they let this linger on into next season. Tomorrow, boarding a plane, headed to Mobile, Alabama, actually flying into New Orleans. Anybody, I can maybe stop by and talk to Mickey Loomis and say, hey, what are we doing here, Mickey? Let's make a deal. Let's get this thing done. Then take a rental car to Mobile. We're going to give you the best wall-to-wall coverage you can possibly get at the Senior Bowl. All the prospects that the Arizona Cardinals are going to be eyeing at the 3rd overall spot, 35th overall spot, all of their picks all the way until round 7, who the Arizona Cardinals are going to be looking at. John Michael Schmitz, the center out of Minnesota, John Venerable, put together this incredibly in-depth list of prospects that we're going to be targeting there, me and Shane. And we're going to
I kind of put it together. I kind of stole it off of SB Nation's website as well, but I copied and pasted it onto a Word doc for you.
You're working smarter, not harder, and I like that. I really appreciate that. I appreciate everybody tuning in, of course, hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe, because anytime we drop content from Mobile, you're going to want to know about it. And if you have that alert set up, you're going to get that little notification that says we got new content for you coming right to your smartphone or smart device. Definitely make sure you're following at PHNX_Cardinals for our entire trip as well. Follow it on Instagram, Twitter, follow Johnny and myself. It's gonna be a ball, man. And hopefully know more tomorrow after Mike Kafka interviews.
Kafka, then Callahan, then Lou
Kafka,
on Thursday,
then
Amarillo, Armadillo, and then Callahan on Thursday. Check this hard-hitting journalism out from your boy, Not, at gophnx.com. Howard Balzer, I'm sure, is going to have tremendous content this week in light of the Senior Bowl, in light of the coaching search. Slam that promo code Howard, HOWARD. Slam the subscribe button on PHNX Sports on YouTube. We are coming off PHNX Cardinals, our best month to date. That's because of all of you. We own the offseason. We keep the party going. At some point, we're going to get a head coach. But until then, for Bo Brock, I'm Johnny Venerable. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.